Here's the thing nobody tells you about California. You think you know it. The skyline of LA, the Golden Gate Bridge, the Hollywood sign lit up like a promise somebody forgot to keep. But step outside the 5 or 6 names everybody already knows, and the whole rest of the state turns into one thing: a big drive-through. We found this out the hard way as a family. We drove the entire Pacific Coast Highway, top of Washington, all the way down to the Mexican border, and we hugged the cliffs. The kind of road they used to sell you a luxury sedan in a 60-second car commercial on. And you don't think about the fact that somebody actually lives there. Bixby Bridge, the one you've seen 100 times and never once knew the name of. Big Sur, where the fog doesn't lift so much as it negotiates with the sun. We drove through the redwood trees that were standing before there was a Rome, and came out the other side in a blink and it's gone town called Klamath, where the only thing telling you it exists is a sign shaped like a bear. We ate the champagne cake at the Madonna Inn in San Luis Obispo, where every room is a different fever dream in pink. Walked Hearst Castle, a place one newspaper man built because he simply could. Petted an old dog sleeping in the sun outside the Henry Miller Library, a library in the middle of nowhere, dedicated to a writer the town once couldn't stand. Then we went inland: Sequoia, Yosemite, Redding up north, where the Central Valley opens up into those long, flat, nothing for an hour views, then closes again into wine country, where the vines are doing the same thing they were doing 100 years before anybody had heard of Napa. Then south, past the Salton Sea, which sounds like an ocean and looks like the moon, to Salvation Mountain and East Jesus, in a town called Bombay Beach, where you stand there thinking, something happened here, something big, and then it just left. We ran the Mother Road, Route 66, stopped at Roy's in Amboy, hiked a volcanic crater on a bluebird day with nothing around us but heat and silence, found a forest of glass bottles in the middle of the Mojave at Elmer's Bottle Tree Ranch, watched retired airliners sit wing to wing in the desert like a parking lot for ghosts. The Mojave, by the way, nobody put a ranger station on it. Nobody made it a national park, and it might be one of the most beautiful places in the country anyway. Anza Borrego, where you could actually sit on a rock and watch the spot where someone else is about to spend a week walking the Pacific Crest Trail just to get where you drove in 20 minutes. Lancaster, where there's a stretch of road at exactly 55 miles an hour that plays the William Tell Overture under your tires, because someone at some point decided that should exist. And then 395, the Sierra Nevada on your left shoulder, Death Valley breathing on your right, Barstow, Ridgecrest, Trona, Lone Pine, Manzanar, Bishop. Too many towns to list, so we're not going to list them all. We've picked 12. Here's a taste of what's waiting when you finally hit the brakes. Bodie, once the most lawless boomtown in California, now frozen exactly as the last resident left it. The dishes are actually still on the table. Bishop, where a city 250 miles south quietly drained an entire valley dry, and the farmers fought back with 500 pounds of dynamite, the water war that inspired Chinatown. Lone Pine, the orange rocks where Hollywood built the entire myth of the American West. 10 miles from the camp where the government imprisoned Japanese American families during the war. Locke, the only town in America built by Chinese immigrants, for Chinese immigrants, on land the law said they could never own. Allensworth, which is California's only town built entirely by African Americans, for African Americans, founded by a man who was born a slave and rose to be the highest ranking black officer in the U.S. Army. A town called Rough and Ready, the gold mining town that actually seceded from the United States and unseceded 3 months later because they couldn't buy beer. Weaverville, where 2,000 men once watched two rival armies fight each other with swords and spears, forged by the town's own blacksmith. California City, which is actually a sociology professor bought 82,000 acres of empty desert in 1958 to build a city for 400,000 people, and nobody came. The roads are still out there. I've driven them, scarring the satellite photos to this day. Trona, which you've probably seen in other car commercials, a chemical mining outpost in the Mojave where Wyatt Earp once showed up, not as the law, but as hired muscle. Then we're going to go to Mendocino, a California logging town built by homesick New Englanders, so convincing as New England that Hollywood used it to fake Maine on national television. Fiddletown, a town so embarrassed by its own name, one man got it legally changed. He died. The town changed it right back. And then Calico, a real silver ghost town, bought by the man who invented the American theme park. And now, nobody can quite agree where the history ends and the attraction begins. This is Drive-Thru Towns, a podcast about the places you've probably slowed down, maybe even stopped for a drink, but then just kept going and never once wondered about it. The gas station that used to be a bank, the dirt lot that used to be 10,000 people, the water that used to be a river. Every episode, we slow down in one of these places and tell you what was actually there. The boom, the bust, the water war, the crime, the cult, the country that seceded from the United States over a beer run, the town that was embarrassed by its own name, the town built by people who weren't legally allowed to own the ground it sits on. California isn't just the 5 cities on the postcard. It's everything in between. Drive-Thru Towns. New episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Slow down. There's going to be a story there.
'Cause in every place I'll find some peace of mind. 'Cause help me